The stage lights felt hotter than the sun, blinding me for a moment. I stood there, holding hands with the other finalist, our smiles stretched tight across our faces. My heart was not just beating, it was pounding a frantic drum against my ribs, a sound so loud I was sure everyone in the arena could hear it. We had gone through weeks of exhausting rehearsals, endless interviews, and the constant pressure of being judged. It all came down to this single, breathtaking moment. The host held the card, his voice booming through the speakers, creating a silence that felt heavier than any sound. I squeezed my fellow contestant's hand, a silent prayer escaping my lips. This was it. This was the moment my entire life had been leading up to. Then, a name was called. It was not mine. For a split second, the world seemed to stop. The roar of the crowd was a distant hum, like the sound of the ocean heard from inside a seashell. I felt my smile falter, but years of training kicked in, forcing the corners of my lips to stay up. I turned to the winner, wrapped my arms around her, and whispered congratulations I barely remember saying. The camera zoomed in, capturing my graceful defeat, but inside, a storm was raging. It was a strange and hollow feeling, to have dreamed of something so vividly for so long, only to watch it materialize for someone else, right before your very eyes. It felt like a public heartbreak, broadcast for millions to see. Walking off that stage was one of the longest walks of my life. Each step felt heavy, as if I were wading through deep water. The bright lights that had once promised glory now felt like interrogators, exposing my failure. Backstage, the air was thick with celebration, but I moved through it like a ghost. I found a quiet corner, away from the happy chaos, and finally let the tears fall. They were not just tears of disappointment, they were tears of shame and a deep, cutting sense of inadequacy. I had given everything I had, poured every ounce of my being into this competition, and it still was not enough. The thought echoed in my mind, a cruel and relentless whisper, "You are not enough." That night, the crown felt heavier on her head than it ever could have on mine, because I was carrying the weight of my own failure. The journey back to the hotel was a blur of sympathetic looks and quiet condolences from my team. I wanted to be strong for them, to tell them it was okay, but the words wouldn't come out. All I could think about was the final moment on stage, the echo of a name that wasn't mine, and the crushing realization that my dream had just slipped through my fingers. The rejection was not just about a title, it felt like a rejection of my entire being, of everything I had worked for and everything I hoped to be. It was a pain so deep, I feared it would never go away. My dream of becoming a beauty queen did not start under the harsh glare of stage lights. It began under the gentle glow of starlight on a small beach in my hometown. I grew up in a coastal community where the rhythm of life was dictated by the tides. My earliest memories are of salty air, the feeling of sand between my toes, and the sound of waves crashing against the shore. I was a quiet child, more comfortable with books than with big crowds. My world was small, but my dreams were vast, stretching as far as the ocean horizon. I would watch the Miss Universe pageant on our small television, completely mesmerized by the smart, confident women who walked the stage. They were more than just beautiful faces to me. They were storytellers. They spoke with such passion about their countries, their advocacies, and their hopes for the world. I saw them as modern-day queens, women who used their platforms to make a real difference. I remember one winner in particular who spoke about empowering young girls. Her words resonated deep within me. I wanted to be like her. I wanted to have a voice that people would listen to. I wanted to represent my country, not just for its beautiful beaches, but for the strength and resilience of its people. That was when the seed of the dream was planted in my heart. My Lola, my grandmother, was my first and biggest fan. She would watch the pageants with me, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She saw the dream in me before I even fully understood it myself. She would tell me stories of strong Filipino women who overcame great challenges. "You have that same fire in you, Apo," she would say, her voice full of conviction. She taught me how to walk with my head held high, not with arrogance but with a quiet confidence in who I was. She believed in me so fiercely that it made me start to believe in myself. My dream was not just my own, it was a shared dream, nurtured by her unwavering love and support. As I grew older, the dream took on a more concrete shape. It was no longer just about the sparkling crown or the beautiful gown. It became about the opportunity to have a platform, a microphone to speak for the things I cared about. I wanted to bring attention to the struggles of coastal communities like mine, to talk about environmental protection and the importance of education for children in remote areas. The pageant became the path, the vehicle through which I could turn my quiet passion into meaningful action. It was a dream woven from the salt water of my home and the starlight of my aspirations, a dream that felt as real and as essential as breathing. In the days and weeks following my loss, the world lost its color. I stayed in my room, the curtains drawn shut, creating a dim, gray space that matched my mood. The silence was deafening, broken only by the replay of my failure in my mind. I scrolled through social media, a masochistic habit of reading comments that confirmed my worst fears. Some were kind, but many were critical, dissecting my every move, my every answer. Each negative comment was a tiny paper cut on my already wounded spirit. I felt so exposed, so raw. The confidence I had spent years building had crumbled into dust, leaving behind a hollow shell of self-doubt. My family tried to reach me, their gentle knocks on my door a constant reminder of their love. But I felt unworthy of their comfort. How could I face them when I had let everyone down? I had carried the hopes of my small town on my shoulders, and I had stumbled at the finish line. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest and making it hard to breathe. I replayed the final question over and over again. Could I have answered it better? Was my walk not graceful enough? Was my smile not bright enough? The questions were a relentless torment, with no answers that could bring me peace. I just wanted to disappear, to erase the memory of that night from existence. The desire to quit was overwhelming. The thought of ever stepping on a stage again filled me with a paralyzing fear. Why would I put myself through that kind of public humiliation again? The pageant world, which once seemed so glamorous and full of promise, now felt like a cruel and unforgiving arena. I told myself it was over. I would find a different path, a quieter life away from the judgment of the public eye. It was easier to give up on the dream than to risk another heartbreak. I tried to convince myself that it was a silly childhood fantasy anyway, something I should have outgrown. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. Giving up felt like a betrayal of the little girl who watched the stars on the beach, of the grandmother who believed in me without question. This internal conflict was exhausting. One part of me screamed to run away and never look back, while the other whispered, "Is this really how you want your story to end?" I was lost in a fog of my own making, unable to see a way forward. The weight of that fallen crown was immense, and I did not know if I would ever have the strength to stand up straight again. The pain was real, the self-doubt was crippling, and the dream felt like it was dying a slow, painful death inside me. After weeks of hiding from the world, I knew something had to change. I could not stay in that dark room forever. My journey back to the light began with one simple yet incredibly difficult question. Why? Why did I want to win so badly? As I sat with that question, journaling my thoughts, a painful truth began to surface. A large part of my motivation had been about seeking external validation. I wanted the crown to prove to myself and to everyone else that I was worthy. I wanted the applause and the admiration to fill a void within me. The loss was so devastating because it took away that validation I was so desperately chasing. This realization was a turning point. It was humbling to admit that my why had been fragile, dependent on the opinions of others. I knew that if I were to ever find true happiness, whether I won a crown or not, my motivation had to come from a deeper, more stable place. I had to shift my focus from what I could get to what I could give. I started to think less about the glamour and more about the purpose. The crown was not the end goal, it was a tool. It was a megaphone to amplify the causes I cared about. This shift in perspective was not instantaneous. It was a slow, deliberate process of unlearning old habits and building a new foundation for my dream. I went back to my hometown, not in defeat, but in search of clarity. I walked along the same beaches where my dream was born. I spoke with the fishermen, with the mothers, and I played with the children whose futures I wanted to help secure. I saw their struggles firsthand, the lack of resources for education, the impact of pollution on their livelihood, their faces, their stories. They became my new why. My purpose was no longer about a title for myself, it was about being a voice for them. This was a motivation that no panel of judges could take away from me. It was real, it was authentic, and it belonged entirely to me. This newfound purpose ignited a different kind of fire within me. It was not the desperate, anxious fire of needing to win, but a steady, burning flame of commitment. I understood that true victory was not about standing on a stage with a crown on my head. It was about standing up for something meaningful, for using my life to make a positive impact, however small. The fear of losing my place in the spotlight was replaced by the desire to shine a light on others. I was no longer a girl chasing a crown. I was a woman on a mission. This change in my why was the most important victory I could have ever achieved. No one achieves a dream alone. I learned this lesson in the most profound way as I began to rebuild myself. My first step was to open the door I had kept shut for so long and let my family in. Their love was the gentle medicine my bruised spirit needed. They did not pressure me or ask me difficult questions. They just sat with me, listened when I was ready to talk, and reminded me of the person I was beyond any title or competition. My mother's quiet strength and my father's steady encouragement became my anchors. My Lola, with her timeless wisdom, simply said, "Sometimes we must fall to learn how to fly higher." Her words gave me hope. Realizing I could not walk this new path with my old team, who were focused solely on winning, I knew I needed a change. I sought out mentors who understood my new mission-driven approach. I found a new coach, a former queen herself, who was known for her focus on advocacy and personal development. She taught me that authenticity was my greatest asset. "Don't try to be the queen you think they want," she advised. "Be the queen you are meant to be. Your purpose will shine brighter than any sequin." Her guidance was invaluable. She helped me see that my past failure was not a weakness, but a part of my story that made me more relatable and more human. My new team felt less like a training camp and more like a family, a village dedicated to a shared purpose. It included a communications coach who helped me articulate my advocacy with clarity and passion, a physical trainer who focused on strength and health rather than just aesthetics, and a small group of volunteers who believed in my community projects. We spent weekends in my hometown, organizing beach cleanups and small reading sessions for the children. This work grounded me. It constantly reminded me of my why. Seeing the direct impact of our efforts was more rewarding than any round of applause. This village of support became my safety net. They celebrated my small victories and picked me up when I stumbled. They saw my potential even when my own self-doubt crept back in. Having them by my side gave me the courage to consider returning to the stage. The thought was still terrifying, but it was no longer about facing the fear alone. It was about standing on that stage as a representative of my community, my family, and my dedicated team. Their belief in me was a powerful force, slowly but surely rebuilding the confidence that had been shattered. I was not just one person anymore. I was part of a movement. With my new purpose and my village behind me, the preparation for my return to the pageant world was completely different. It was no longer a grueling chore driven by the fear of not being good enough. Instead, it became a disciplined and joyful process of self-improvement. Every aspect of my training was now connected to my advocacy. My passerella, my walk on stage, was no longer just about perfecting a hip sway. My coach taught me to walk with intention, to imagine that with every step, I was walking towards the children I wanted to help, carrying their hopes with me. It transformed my presence from performative to powerful. My physical training was also redefined. Before, my focus was on achieving an unrealistic ideal of a pageant body. This time, my trainer and I focused on building strength, stamina, and overall health. The goal was to feel strong, not just to look thin. I needed the energy to keep up with my advocacy work, to travel to remote coastal areas, and to handle the demanding schedule of the competition. This approach was empowering. I learned to love my body for what it could do, for its resilience and power, rather than judging it for how it looked. This healthy relationship with my body radiated a new kind of confidence from within. The most significant part of my preparation was deepening my advocacy work. It was not just a talking point for the Kwanda portion. It was my life's passion. I spent months developing a concrete project called Project Pagzibol, which aimed to build small, storm-resilient libraries and learning huts in coastal villages, providing children with safe spaces to read and learn. I worked with local architects and community leaders to design the structures. I organized fundraising events, not as a beauty queen candidate, but as a dedicated community organizer. This work gave me substance. I knew that even if I did not win, this project would continue. The advocacy was real, with or without a crown. Every interview practice, every fitting for a gown, every early morning workout was infused with this sense of purpose. When I practiced my Kwanda, I was not memorizing perfect answers. I was learning to share my stories, the stories of my community with heartfelt sincerity. The gown I would wear was chosen not just because it was beautiful, but because its design was inspired by the ocean waves of my home. Everything was connected. I was no longer trying to fit into the mold of a beauty queen. I was building my own mold, one that was shaped by my unique story, my unwavering commitment, and my profound love for my people. Stepping back onto that stage a year later was a surreal experience. The lights were just as bright, the crowd just as loud, but I was different. The paralyzing fear I had anticipated was replaced by a calm resolve. I was not there to win back what I had lost. I was there to share who I had become. As I walked, I remembered my coach's words, picturing the faces of the children from my village. I was walking for them. During the interviews, I did not give rehearsed answers. I spoke from the heart about Project Pagsable, about my journey of failure, and about my belief in the power of second chances. My voice did not tremble. It was steady, filled with a conviction I had never felt before. The final moments arrived, just as they had a year ago. I found myself once again in the top 2, holding hands with another beautiful and deserving woman. But this time, the frantic pounding in my chest was gone. There was a quiet peace within me. I looked out into the audience and saw my family, my Lola, and my team, their faces beaming with pride. In that moment, I knew I had already won. The true victory was not in the outcome, but in the journey. It was in overcoming my fear, in finding my purpose, and in standing on that stage as a whole person, proud of my story, scars and all. When the host opened the final envelope, I held my breath, but not in desperation. It was a moment of surrender, and then he called my name. The roar of the crowd was overwhelming and tears streamed down my face. But these were not tears of shame or disappointment. They were tears of gratitude, of joy, and of overwhelming relief. As the crown was placed on my head, it felt surprisingly light. It was not the heavy burden I had once imagined, but a symbol of the new beginning I had fought so hard for. It was a symbol of hope, not just for me, but for every person who had ever been told they were not enough. My journey taught me the most important lesson of my life. True success is not measured by the absence of failure, but by the courage to rise again. Rejection is not a dead end, it is a redirection. It is an opportunity to look within, to redefine your purpose, and to come back stronger, more authentic, and more committed than before. To anyone out there facing a closed door or a painful loss, please do not give up on your dream. Let your setback be the foundation upon which you build a more meaningful story. Believe in your capacity to grow, find your deeper why, and remember that sometimes falling is the only way to learn how to truly soar.